from our study of the three last topic, and we're going to have a quick return back to our Atlantic slave trade topic. Now, our Atlantic slave trade topic, we have a final section which we have to complete, and in this final section it's about the abolition of the slave trade. And what we mean by that is the eventual decision by the British government in the 1800s that slavery could no longer continue, and that slavery would be outlawed and become illegal, and that people who were involved in the slave trade and the ownership of slaves would have these slaves removed, and people would be freed. Now, what we look at in this section is what are the arguments that were put across to win people over to the idea that slavery should be abolished. We also look at the methods that were used in campaigning for this. We look at the arguments that were given from the pro-slavery side that slavery as an institution should continue, and then finally we look at what was the reason for the eventual success and the outlaw of the slave trade. Now, this week we're going to look at the arguments against slavery, and we're going to hopefully by the end of this week you'll be able to explain the arguments used against the slave trade by the abolition. Now, when we think about the arguments that are used, we think about the religious, the humanitarian, and the economic. Now, what we mean by the religious is arguments that were used from a Christian point of view. Now, because there's a realisation that at this point in time, British society is fundamentally shaped by Christian ideas, and the Christian sort of religious viewpoints on slavery, if they change, that will change people's ideas. The second was humanitarian, and this is an acknowledgement and an awareness that the enslaved Africans were human, and that they had a right to be treated in a humane and humanitarian way. So a lot of arguments were used to identify the sort of exploitation and the traumas that were inflicted upon these enslaved Africans to try and appeal to people's emotions of the horrific and barbaric nature of this slave. And then the final one is economic arguments that can be used that financially and economically more money could actually be gained from a system of business and commerce that wasn't founded upon the slave trade. Now, the first task that you're going to complete this week is you're going to use the different sort of tiles that I've got here, that I've got a number of different arguments that were used against the slave trade. And what you're going to do is you're going to try and identify them under the three headings of religious, humanitarian, and economic. So what I'm going to do is run through each of them, just give you an idea of some of them, and give you an idea of what is the argument and what one would that fit under. So, first one, religious groups opposed the trade on the grounds that it was against God's will, seen slavery as morally wrong, unjust and evil. So that's clearly a religious argument. But if we take the second one here of cheaper sugar could be bought from Brazil, Cuba, or Bengal, India. So there's a clear here an economic argument. So what you're going to do is just going to go through each of these, and then in your draft or a Word document, you're just going to identify each of these statements under the different headings. Now, the second task that you're going to complete this week is a worksheet that I've given. Now, on this worksheet, it's about the origins of the abolitionist movement, and what it's giving you the context, it's giving you the history behind the origins of the abolitionist movement and how that became developed within British society. So it talks about some specific groups like the Quakers, a religious Christian group that campaigned for the abolition of the slave trade, some specific abolitionists themselves like Thomas Clarkson, Graham Sharp, John Newton, etc. And we'll come back to look at these men in specific context. But what you're going to be doing is you're just going to read through this information. You're going to look at the information it gives you, and then we've got a number of tasks down here that you're going to complete. There's about 6 questions. So the key point here is to answer them in full sentences. So what I'm looking for you to do is think about how can we use the words of the question to help us form our answer. We've got, again, copy and complete the following table with religious, humanitarian, and economic. Now, what you can do is you can think about the one that you've done previously, try and see if you can work to commit that to memory. What I mean by that is you might want to say, well, how many of the religious, humanitarian, and economic can I commit to memory? Fill out this table. Also, if there's any further ones that are given on the information above that you don't have, you can add them to your table. And then finally, there's 2 knowledge-based exam questions. So describe the events of the Zong case and explain why attitudes for slavery are starting to change. So pretty straightforward. A number of different questions just for you complete this week on the origins of the abolitionist movement. I've also applied just a simple introductory YouTube video based on the kind of abolition movement to give you the idea of a flavour of what we'll be talking about over the next couple of weeks. Okay, so once again, if you've got any questions, just send them through to me, and good luck with your tasks this week.